Among the most unique of the more remote kingdoms of the earth is that little island on the fringe of the Arctic Circle, known as Iceland. Its first colonists were wise and high-born chieftains, or Vikings, who brought from their mother country, Norway, an already advanced civilization over 1,000 years ago.
The Norse word tafel means table, and it's affiliated with a group of games, a family of two-player strategy games of asymmetrical nature played by the Vikings, which include tablut and naftafel and others. But I'm going to tell you about a game they play in Iceland that is not included in the tafel games, but is a tables game. There's lots of ways to categorize tabletop games. But there's no real Dewey Decimal System, so to speak, or taxonomy that's agreed to around the world of how these categories should be defined. So every author has their own way of doing such things. Every collector has their own way of piling certain games together. But it's a little confusing because table games, games played on a table, also include a set of games called tables games. And that name kind of derives from the layout of the board. There are, in a game that qualifies as a tables game, 4 tables, 4 quadrants of the board. And each one generally has 6 spaces or 6 points, and going around the board from table to table is part of the game. Backgammon is just the best known version of tables games. Throughout the years there have been many tables games. Now, David Parlett, who was the author of the Oxford History of Board Games book, categorized tables games into several categories. One of them is a category of no movement. There's a little game called Eureka. I think he lists maybe 5, 6 other games, and they essentially use the tables board, the backgammon board, as kind of a scoring mechanism. Some of these games are really close to shut-the-box type games, or maybe one step above that, where you roll dice to place a piece and roll dice to bear it off, and that's all. There's not a lot of player interaction. In that case, you're just playing against the odds. The second category is a contrary movement, wherein all the pieces are moving opposite directions around the board. Ooh, that's hard to do. And that's how backgammon works, wherein somebody's going this direction, somebody's going the other direction. And it seems like most of the tables games work in that way. The third category is parallel movement, in which all the pieces are going the same direction around the board. And it's more of a race-like game, but you are passing each other. And that brings us to another category of game, which I've discussed before, which is the running fight game. And the running fight games are generally moving in the same direction at least part of the time. If you're interested in running fight games, look at Saku and Tab. There's also the famous Viking game Daldos, which is played on a board that resembles a dragon ship. And now we get to the subject of this video, Elta Stelpur. It's an Icelandic game. Objective is not to bear off your pieces like most of the tables games, but it is a capturing game. And you are trying to eliminate your opponent while chasing them around the board. Chasing being the key word here. Elta Stelpur literally translates from the Icelandic to chasing the girls. In the 13th century, King Alfonso of Castile ordered a book be written that documented the games that were being played in the court and by the locals. And they documented a game called Todas Tablas, which is pretty similar to how Elta Stelpur is played. If you ignore the fact that this is a tables game with the 4 quadrants, different configurations of games have very similar chase elements to them. Specifically, I'm thinking of Hyena and Mahen from North Africa, and Chakabara from India, and there's a couple of Chinese games that do the same kind of thing. This particular game was featured by R.C. Bell in his big book of games and a couple other publications, and Murray mentions it and so on. So it's pretty commonly known. Archaeologists have unearthed some pieces that were probably used for the game back in the olden days, and they're very, very similar to game pieces that have been found in northern parts of the British Isles. The Roman influences there and such. But some artisans these days have been putting together some beautiful boards for Elta Stelpur, and definitely worth checking that out. And the game seems traditionally to be played with a set of Roman dice, regular cubic dice. Well, that's enough history for now. Let's get into the rules here, and you can see how to play the game. As noted, the game is usually played on a backgammon-style board with the 4 tables and 12 points along each side. But I prefer something that looks a little more exotic. Now each player gets 6 pieces of a distinguishable color, and these are positioned on their left-hand table, as shown here. All pieces will move in an anti-clockwise direction around the board. The game is won by capturing all 6 of your opponent's pieces, traditionally called girls. A little side note here. The origin of the word girl, the etymology of the word girl, is in some dispute. In Middle English, the word girl, or close to it, was used to indicate a young person of either sex, either gender. But it might be related to a Gaelic word that indicates something pretty, something fragile and beautiful in that way. On the other hand, it might be related to a Welsh word, which I won't even try to pronounce, but it's close to girl. The word Stelpur in Icelandic definitely means girl. First player is traditionally determined by rolling a single die, and the lower number takes the first turn. The game is played in 2 phases. As long as both players have 2 or more pieces on the board, the game is in the first phase. As soon as either player is reduced to a single piece, the game enters the second phase, which I'll explain later. In the first phase, a turn consists of throwing both dice and then moving 1 or more pieces according to this movement table. You will see that it's all about 1s and 6s. A dice throw of 1 and a 1. Move 2 pieces, 1 point each, then go again. A 1 and any other number, move 1 piece, 1 point. A 1 and a 6, move 1 piece, 1 point, and another, or the same piece, 6 points, in either order. Any number on both dice, you move 2 pieces, that many points each, or 1 piece, 2 times that many points, and throw again. Any pair of unlike numbers is no move. A 6 plus any number, you move 6 places. And a 6 plus a 6, you move 4 pieces, 6 points each. No more than 1 piece can occupy the same position. If a move takes a piece to a point occupied by your own piece, then that piece is moved forward to the next vacant space. If, however, a piece lands on a point occupied by an opposing piece, then that piece is captured and removed from the game. In the second phase, the single piece is called a horneskella, or a corner rattler. The moves of a horneskella are counted only on the corner points of each of the 4 tables, as shown here. To a horneskeller, the board is treated as though it was only 8 points. As a horneskeller can only move to corner points, it can only capture or be captured on the corner points. When a piece first becomes a horneskella, it could do so at a point which is not one of the 8 corner points. If this happens, it stays where it is until its owner throws a die result, allowing it to move. It basically moves, as in phase 1, until it legally reaches one of the 8 horneskella corner points. The horneskeller moves according to this table. A 1 and a 1, you move forward 2 corner points. A 1 and any other number, you move forward 1 corner point. A 1 and a 6, you move forward 2 corner points. Any doubles and you get no move, but you get to throw again. Any pair of unlike numbers, you get no move. A 6 plus any number, you move forward 2 corner points. And a 6 plus a 6, you move forward 4 corner points. Now here's one very important note about the Horneskella. It is safe from capture if the 2 points immediately in front of and behind it are occupied by the opponent's pieces. If the opponent throws a 1 and 6, they may first move one of the sandwiching pieces away and then may be able to capture the Horneskella and win the game. If both players are reduced to a single piece, then they're both Horneskella. This can sometimes lead to a long chase going many, many times around the board. I highly recommend printing out those little movement tables, at least until you get used to the game, because it is quite different than what we're used to in most rolling dice games. Now that said, there are some discrepancies in the rules, depending on whose rules you read. Specifically, the movement table that David Parlett puts to the game is just a little different than this one I just described to you. Of course, that's typical for ancient games. As Elta Stelpur, chasing the girls. I wonder if they do that a lot in Iceland. Follow the links in the show notes. You can get a copy of our Peg Pastimes version of the game and give it a try. As always, be sure to drop a comment and let me know what you think of the game. If you know of any rules variations that I should be aware of. And like I always say, be sure to play every day.